How can I be a universalist when Revelation is pretty darn clear on the fiery lake lasting forever and ever? So this is the question that somebody asked on an earlier video about universalism, and they're asking specifically about Revelation 20:10. Then the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were also. Their painful suffering will be inflicted upon them day and night, forever and always. Then also death and the grave were thrown into the fiery lake. This is the fiery lake, the second death. Anyone whose name wasn't found in the scroll of life was thrown into the fiery lake. So this has to completely undo any sort of theology of universalism, right? No, I don't think so. So a couple things to note. One, in the early church, there were a variety of forms of universalism. As a reminder for folks just tuning in, universalism seemed to be the majority perspective for the first 300 years of the church until Augustine and the emperor took over Christianity, and believing in a sort of punishing, torturous hell became more convenient for an imperial form of Christianity. But within those variety of forms of universalism, you had a kind that said that even the devil and his angels would be saved, would reconcile with their creator, and forms that said universalism extended to all human beings, maybe even some demons, but definitely not to Satan. So there was disagreement there. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is that the words that are translated in English translations of the Bible as forever come from the Greek word aionios, which we get the word eon or ion from. And that is probably a faulty translation, or in the least not the only way that you can translate this. The foremost scholar that you have to read on this is Ilaria Ramielli, who is an Italian scholar. She writes a bunch of universalism. You can get her book, Terms for Eternity, Aionios and Iodios, in classical and Christian texts. However, it's $141. So if you want to spend your money a different way, I would suggest A Larger Hope, Volume 1, which is by Ilaria Ramielli, and she's got a appendix about those Greek terms and how they really should not be translated as forever or eternity. So in a text like this, where you have forever and ever, they're going to be tortured in the lake of fire, she would translate those as an age and an age, an age and an age. And you could also see that in David Bentley Hart's translation of the New Testament. The other thing to keep in mind is that you have other characters who end up in that lake of fire, such as the kings of the nations of the earth, which are a recurring character in the book of Revelation. And here, a chapter later in Revelation 21, you can see that the kings of the earth are now bringing their glory into the New Jerusalem because its gates are never going to be shut. So those kings that were in the fiery death, the second death, the lake of fire, well, now they're bringing their glory into the New Jerusalem. They got out somehow. And this holds true in Revelation 22, the final chapter as well, where Jesus is saying, "Favored are those who wash their robes, so they have right to access the tree of life and may enter the city by those gates that are never shut. Outside of the city are those dogs and drug users and spellcasters and those who commit sexual immorality, etc. But they have the option at any point to wash their robes and enter into the city whose gates are never shut." Which then sort of belies the translation of this lasting forever and ever in eternity. No, I think it lasts an age and an age. It could be very long, where someone freely chooses to say out of the presence of God in the New Jerusalem. So in sort of a way to take this out of the poetic sense of Revelation, God will set up their new kingdom. God will set up the new heavens and the new earth, and people can choose to opt out for as long as they want. And that may be Aionios, an age and an age, and then decide, yeah, this isn't worth it. And then they can wash their robes in the river of life and have free entrance to that new creation whose gates are never shut.